Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Welcome in to Game Over Toronto after that's a frustrating loss, an avoidable loss to the Detroit Red Wings on Hockey Night in Canada. But welcome in. I'm your host, Zach Payne, as always. Thank you for joining us on Game Over Toronto. A little bit of a more, I want to say, relaxed night because I don't really know how to describe the feeling with this game. It's not necessarily a more monotone game. This is one of those games that kind of drains you a little bit, almost, because you see the writing on the wall. I don't know about you guys, but I was watching that game, and when Moritz Seider scored at the end of the second period, there was this feeling in the back of my head where you just kind of knew. You just kind of knew that the Red Wings were going to win tonight, that the Leafs just didn't quite have it. The vibes were just off. We're going to talk about it, of course. Before we get into the game, make sure you hit like on the stream, subscribe to Game Over Toronto. If you're listening on podcasting platforms, make sure you follow the show. You can follow me on Twitter at ZachPayne41 as well. So, this game, to start with, the Leafs lose 3-2. A lot of people are going to be up in arms, or I guess 4-2, sorry. They lose a 3-2 game 4-2 with an empty netter with 2 seconds left in the game. Who cares? The big story in this game is probably going to be the offsides, where, Mitch Marner scores a goal. Upon video review 20 seconds earlier, Auston Matthews was just a pinch offside. So frustrating. And we're gonna start there. We're gonna start with the offside reviews because it is an interesting conversation to have about the review process, because a lot of people hate offside reviews. I hate them, but I understand them. This is a game that kind of brings that conversation to the forefront once again, because the game is decided by one goal, well, 2 goals, but 1 goal would have forced this game to go to overtime, and it always sucks when your favorite team scores a goal, you celebrate, woohoo, and it's challenged for offside. And the second the Red Wings challenged that play, it was getting called back. Because teams don't challenge offsides unless they're sure. So you see it's a millimeter, like less than an inch offside is what it is. And that kind of destroyed the vibes of this game a little bit, at least for me, where once that got called back, you kind of had a feeling where it's just like, tonight's just not a good night. Now, obviously, full credit to the Leafs. They did the top line, really. Mitch Marner obviously has a big game. He sets up Auston Matthews for a power play goal. Beautiful setup, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then he takes a long shot from the point that Matthew Knies deflects. But Marner was just everywhere in this game at both ends of the ice. This was a very good, Marner kind of carried the load for the top line a little bit. Wasn't the best Auston Matthews game. Was a pretty solid Matthew Knies game. There's been a weird amount of discourse about him online in the last 24 hours or so, about how good of a sophomore season he's having. I people trying to delegitimize his breakout. I know he's playing with Marner and Matthews, but Matthew Knies is good. All right. Matthew Knies is good. But yeah. So Auston Matthews, he makes up for the offside later. But again, the lack of offense has been a talking point all season. It has been at the forefront of all conversations about the Leafs, is the bottom 6. As David put in the chat before the stream got underway, it's time for radical changes to the Leafs bottom 6. Now, what would that even mean? A trade. But here's the thing, is that where the Leafs bottom 6 is at right now is obviously not good enough, because even if they have good game, our bar for good games is not high enough for the bottom 6. Because I look at tonight, if this was a game that let's say the top 6 combines, the second line scores a goal or 2, and the Leafs win tonight, I would have sat here on stream and been like, look, the Leafs bottom 6, they did better. They were in the offensive zone more than they were defending. They had more than 50% of the shot share, but they lose, and it reframes the conversation because the Leafs lose. They only score 2 goals, and all of a sudden we look at the bottom 6 a lot differently because they don't score. They don't score, and that has been the number one problem for the bottom 6 all season. They are pretty good defensively. They are very good defensively even. They do a pretty good job at keeping the puck out of the net. However, they don't score. If you guys, join me for a moment in going back in time to, this would have been 2023, 2022, that era, right? Where the third line was Pierre Engvall, David Kampf, and Ilya Mikheyev, right? Those 3 guys. They were a net 0, right? They did not score. They did not get scored on. The ultimate nothing line. The whole bottom 6 has become that. Now, in theory, I like a line of Bobby McMann, Fraser Minton, and Max Domi, and it's a line that I hope stays together tomorrow night because I think that line could have potential. McMann, in his return, I should mention, his first game coming back from injury, he looked pretty good. He had a couple good scoring chances. He wasn't, the Bobby McMann that has the potential to score 15 plus goals, but he looked all right. He looked fast. He looked heavy on the forecheck. That's what you want to see. Fraser Minton had a rather invisible game tonight. Max Domi had some okay moments. This wasn't, I'm as critical of Max Domi as anyone out there. This was not that bad of a Domi game. He had, there was one play that I was yelling at my screen where I think it was either Minton or McMahon, sends Domi a pass and he just can't quite control it to get a shot off on the cross ice pass. And I was a little frustrated at that. But aside from that, Domi actually played fine. The problem is, and even the fourth line, like Lorentz, Dewar, and Holmberg, I thought looked like a solid line. Holmberg looked a lot more comfortable in that role compared to anything else this season. The problem is, we can rattle through the whole bottom 6, and all of them in a vacuum played fine. The problem is, how many fine games are we going to have before a goal comes, right? The whole problem is, yes, the bottom 6 is fine, but that's about it. They don't score, and that's the problem. They aren't great. They aren't good. They aren't good enough. At the end of the day, that's all that really matters, is the bottom 6, all the players that have rotated in and out, they look fine on a game-to-game basis, but they aren't good enough, and they don't put the puck in the back of the net, which hurts the Leafs because they rely so much on the top 4 scorers that when they don't score enough, this is the result. Matthews scores, Nyes scores, Marner gets 2 assists, so one line does good. I know came on a power play, the Matthews goal, but top line does good. Those 3 perform. Second line has some moments, but they don't score, lose. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. And, that's the... I saw a stat before the game that the Leafs have actually been performing about on par with where they have been the last few seasons, right? They have the same amount of wins. They have relatively the same team save percentage, but they're below 3 goals a game. The Leafs are actually one of the best defensive teams in the entire league. I think they're tied with like 4 teams for second fewest goals allowed per game, right? They're great defensively. They are the only one of the truly elite defensive teams that also don't score more than 3 goals a game. And that's why you can look at the top teams in terms of fewest goals against, and all of them are good teams. You have like the Winnipeg Jets, the Dallas Stars, the New Jersey Devils, like teams of that nature. What's the difference between them and the Leafs is they score. They score more than 3 goals a game, and the Leafs don't. The Leafs just have not scored enough. And we can talk about why that is. But I think it boils down to a few things, right? Lack of bottom 6 scoring is obviously a big factor. Respectfully to Max Pacioretty, I love Max Pacioretty. He's not Tyler Bertuzzi. So there's going to be a drop-off in just goal scoring there as well. But then you have another factor that Leaf fans aren't going to want to talk about. But Austin Matthews, This is what happens when he doesn't score 60 goals in a season. He'll score, 40. He'll be close to 40 this year, maybe 45. And the 25 goal drop off from 69 goals down to 45 or 40 or 45, whatever. The 20 plus goal drop off, we'll say, is going to lead to the Leafs losing more games like this one, where you just need another goal to get you to overtime. You just need one more play, because look, Matthews is the Leafs' best player, but he's not going to score 60 goals every year. That's just a fact. And look, I would love for Matthews to score every year, but it just is what it is. Tonight would have been a mustache mountain class. Sam, I'm sorry you didn't get your Matt Murray call up. I advocated for it. It didn't happen. We have a top 6 and 2 lines to keep the bench warm. Yeah, Luke, you kind of that's the whole problem, right? We have a good top 6. We do not have a third line that scores. The fourth line is whatever. The fourth line, if they don't score, it's not the end of the world. It's the fourth line. Who cares? The big problem is that third line. That third line just doesn't score enough because they don't score at all, really. We came into the season and we were a little too confident that Nick Robertson was going to score 20 goals and that Max Domi was going to maybe score 10, and Calle Yarncroke would come back and score 10 to at a 15 goal pace. Max Domi has not scored this season. Robertson has 2 goals. McMahon has a couple goals, but he scored them largely in a bigger role. And Fraser Minton, who, while I like him as a player, he's not going to drive offense. So that's a big problem as well. I don't agree with Connor Dewar. He's too small for the style he tries to play. Jake McCabe, last of a dying breed of two-way defensemen who can finish body checks. So, okay, let's break this down. Connor Dewar. This is the square peg and a round hole problem the Leafs have been trying to play with David Kampf over the years as well. Same problem, right? You have Connor Dewar, who's a smaller, more skilled fourth liner that still brings the defensive elements you want, right? Again, in a vacuum, Connor Dewar is a fine player. The problem is you play him on a checking fourth line with Steven Lorentz. In this game, Holmberg, who cares? But you play him on a checking line with Steven Lorentz and Ryan Reeves. Yeah, Dewar's going to look lost because he's not a bang and crash forechecker that's going to do the same things that those two do. So he's going to look a little out of place. I think if the fourth line was Dewar, Kampf, Holmberg, I think you would like Dewar a lot more because he would look a lot more in his element. Or even if it was Dewar, Kampf, and Lorentz, which it very well might be when Kampf comes back, he's going to look better. But when you put him in a checking role, he's going to look out of place at 5-on-5. On the penalty kill, he's fine. Penalty kill is perfectly fine. But at 5-on-5, yeah. That's the problem with Dewar. As for McCabe, look, if anyone doesn't like Jake McCabe, I would be surprised because McCabe, ever since he's gotten to Toronto, has been awesome. He's awesome. I don't even necessarily agree that he's a two-way defenseman because he's not that good offensively. He has a pretty good shot, but most of his offensive game is built around pinching up at the blue line to keep the puck in, put it back in the corner for the offense to keep cycling. If the puck comes to him at the point, he's pretty good at, crossing it to the forward that drops back, whether it be Matthews, Marner, Nylander, whomever. And he's good at putting the puck on net. He's not very dynamic offensively, but what he lacks in offense, he makes up for by being a very good defensive defenseman. And he's paired with Kristanev, who is also a very elite defensive defenseman, perhaps the most elite defensive defenseman. And so that pairing is just awesome. All you need from Jake McCabe is a good first pass. When he gets the puck in the defensive zone, you stop the rush, you get the puck, good first pass out, and you break out and go play offense. That's all you need from Jake McCabe, and he has done a great job at that. So, look, I don't know if he's necessarily the last of a dying breed, but yeah, he finishes his checks, which appeals to most fans, right? And he's just really solid. He's really solid. But that is another factor, though. The offense from the back end hasn't really been there. We probably have to have a more in-depth conversation about Morgan Rielly. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it. I'm just putting it out there, though. We might have to have a serious sit-down talk about Morgan Riley at some point in the next few weeks here, because not good. Not good. I'm not convinced Matthews is 100%. I think he's working his way there. He's probably at 90% right now. I don't know. The thing with Matthews is he's had these good moments, but he just hasn't been good enough since he's come back, and really all season, right? I really like Fraser Minton, Bobby McMahon, and Alex Steves, and Nikita Grabenkin. Hey, be careful mentioning Nikita Grabenkin. I might act up on stream. But Minton's solid. McMahon is solid. Steves, in a pinch, is solid, but he's more of an AHL guy. Grabenkin, I cannot wait for Grabenkin to graduate to the NHL full-time. That's going to be sick. Is that a PK Subban jersey? Yes, Sam, you sold it to me back there. Shout out PK Subban, who recorded Austin Matthews' overtime winner in New Jersey. I miss Rasmus Sandin. Oof. Here's the thing with that, Trevor, is if Rasmus Sandin was here, then Oliver Ekman-Larsson would be obsolete. So you basically just have older Rasmus Sandin with OEL. OEL's been solid, though, so I'm not going to complain too much, but... yeah, in terms of the offense from the backhand, actually, that's another thing. OEL he's got to step up the offense a little bit too. He's been really solid defensively, but he's got to step up the offense as well. But yeah, that's what it boils down to, man. You lose games, you're gonna lose some of these close 1-goal games the same way you do in the playoffs, which is you lose them because you don't score enough. The Leafs have decided offense is optional. Usually, past few years, it's been defense is optional. No, now it's offense. Offense has become completely optional some nights. And look, not all of the core four are going to score every night. Like we mentioned it earlier with Luke's comment, that the top six, when they score, the Leafs are going to win. And look, they're very good players, which means one of those, those two lines will score more often than not. But it's not going to happen every game, and that's when the Leafs are going to lose. And I think that's ultimately what's going to cost the Leafs the division title. The Leafs, I think they're currently still first in the Atlantic. They're tied with Florida. Actually, Florida probably passes them because they have the tiebreaker. That's what's going to cost the Leafs the division. That's the reason the Leafs are in the 2-3 spot in the Atlantic compared to the top spot, is because there's always something, right? There's always something that holds this team back from being truly elite. They're good. They're a good team. They've been a good team for a number of years, but they're not truly elite. And that comes down to the offense this year. Last year, it came down to the goaltending. The years before that, it was the defense. And there's always something. And it is what it is. The Leafs this regular season in games on consecutive calendar days Eastern time have a 5-7-1-0 record with 17 such games still left to play before the postseason. Look, David, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying with the Leafs playing consecutive days, whatever. It's the back-to-back issue that the Leafs used to have in the old. It's a fallacy at this point, because in the last 2 years before this one, Sheldon Keefe kind of cracked the back-to-back problem, and the Leafs actually were really good on back-to-backs and playing consecutive days, where having two goalies that are relatively equal kind of eliminates the back-to-back problem. If we go back to the Freddie Anderson days, you had Freddie Anderson and then you had blank backup. I'll say Curtis McElhaney's name just as an example, where, Anderson would play the front half of back-to-backs, and then you'd go on the second half and you would view it as a scheduled loss. Those days are kind of over, and all of these games are winnable now. All of these games are perfectly winnable. You just have to execute, and the Leafs don't too often. If you yes, part of it is due to the back-to-backs with travel, especially where you're a little bit more tired and you don't have quite as much juice. But look, man, every game is winnable. Every game is winnable. So I don't like using games being pushed really close together, consecutive days, back-to-backs. I don't like using those as excuses as much anymore. back like 4 years ago, I absolutely would view those as excuses. But nowadays, it's, I don't know, there's a different vibe with them. But yeah, it'll be nice if the Leafs finish first in the Atlantic, but it'll be nice if they can get to 10 or more points ahead of the fourth place team in the division, stay in the division top 3. I'm not as worried about that. The Leafs, if there is one thing the Leafs are very consistent at, it is being in the top 3 of the Atlantic, but never number 1. So don't worry about that. But with that being said, I've been rambling for a long time. We're going to turn over to our second segment. As I do, reminder to hit that like button and to subscribe to Game Over Toronto. And you're going to see the merch come up on screen. Again, Game Over Network merch. If you want to support our network, it's a very small creator-owned network. So any support you can give us would be greatly appreciated. But you just being here is enough for me. So if you like any of the merch, we have merch for all the Canadian markets. You can go check it out. Again, that's thegameovernetwork.com, or you can scan the QR code on screen as well. Now, this second segment, I kind of teased this earlier, but not really. There has been a weird amount of discourse about Matthew Knies in the last 24 hours. And I want to talk about it a little bit. So, Matthew Knies, sophomore, technically sophomore, because he played a couple of games in 2023, and that, like, in the 2022-23 season, and then played in those playoffs. Unfortunately, gets concussed against Florida in the second round. That was technically his rookie season, but last year was his real rookie season. This is his real sophomore season, even though he's technically been in the league for 3 years now. So, Matthew Knies, over that time, he has graduated from being a third-line checking forward who was very good on the forecheck, but still trying to figure out the scoring touch. And now he is the top line left winger. He is the primary running mate of Matthews and Marner on that top line. He's going to score 20 goals. He might score 25. He's on pace for like 28 or something. He has been very good. But what stands out the most about Matthew Knies, again, let's go back in time to the playoffs. Against Boston last year, Matthew Knies proved that he just has an element to him that a lot of players lack, and that is he can be a true dominant power forward when he wants to be, where he just says F you, wins every puck battle, goes to the hard areas, he plays the game the right way, but plays the game coaches love and coaches rave about. Now this year, he started the season playing like that. He gets injured with a check to the head, and since he's come back, you're kind of missing some of the FU moments, right? You're missing the moments where he just runs through a guy, where he just dominates a puck battle and beats 3 people to the puck and gets it to his line mates, right? You're not seeing those moments as much since he's come back. Part of that could be just he's, understandably a little rattled from that injury. Whenever you take a huge hit like that knocks you out for a number of games, it's expected that you might be a little bit more cautious. Now, I think it was Jack Hahn who put out a tweet about Matthew Knies yesterday or this morning, and talking about how he's hurting Austin Matthews when he plays with him. Now, first of all, I respect Jack Hahn a lot. He's done some great work over the years, and he does a really good job of breaking down different elements of the game and the film aspect, the eye test aspect of hockey. However, my problem with Jack's theory about Matthew Knies being a bad thing for Austin Matthews is, who would you rather in that spot? Because your options are Max Pacioretty, who, while he thrives with Tavares and Nylander, for some reason that is unbeknownst to me, he's not a top-line player. You have Bobby McMann, who is, fast and gritty and whatnot. He's not a top-line player. He's a good player. I love Bobby McMann. He's not a top-line player. You have Calle Jarnkrok, who's hurt, but has played in that role before. You have Max Domi. I don't want to have too many pure passers on that line, since you already have Mitch Marner, who does the things that Max Domi does, except a lot better, plus is also just like a more complete player, obviously. So I don't want to load, you could try it, but I'd be worried about having too many playmakers on that line. So who does that leave? You could put Nylander there, but then you load up the top line to an extreme measure. You don't really have another option right now aside from Matthew Knies. Now, the benefit last year with Tyler Bertuzzi is there's another option. You put Tyler Bertuzzi there, you can knock Nyes down to the second line. It works great. This year, that's gone. The Leafs chose to invest in Max Domi instead of Tyler Bertuzzi, which means Matthew Nyes is the first line left winger. He is going to be the top line left winger all season, like barring injury or barring a breakout of someone else. So you got to get really comfortable with the fact that Nyes is going to be on that spot. And look, even though Nyes has his deficiencies, he is still figuring things out defensively. He's obviously not a great playmaker. He's a fine passer, but his assist numbers are not going to be like fantastic this year. So you have to kind of accept that. But what does he do? He goes to the net. He's good on the forecheck, and he's good at finding Matthews and Marner in the offensive zone. You kind of just have to take that. You have to take the good with the bad with Matthew Nyes, knowing that he's a young kid who's figuring things out. He, in general, has been good. So, I don't know what, like, your other options are just not that appealing, barring a trade. If you want Matthew Nyes off the top line, you have to trade for someone that can take his spot. And I don't think that's a priority because you have other spots you need to fill. Like, although I get, actually, here's the pathway, I guess I should say, to Nyes not being on the top line if you are of the mind that Jack Hahn is correct and that Nyes should be taken off that spot. You would have to trade for a top line winger to play with Matthews and Marner because they won't break Matthews and Marner up for some reason. And then you bump Nyes down, but then you bump Pacioretty down, and that trickle-down effect would then boost the bottom six, theoretically. So maybe you trade for blank top-line left winger, Matthews, Domi, let's say, to run with Sam's point. If you put Domi on that spot, then you can do Nyes, Tavares, Marner. And then you can do Pacioretty, Minton, Nylander, I guess. Like, it's the trickle down. I think the real answer to fixing the third line, because when I say bottom six, I mean third line. The real answer is you put Nylander there and you have Marner off of Matthews' line. But they don't want to do that. So when they do, you'll find a lot of problems go away. Because if you do, even Nyes, Matthews, Domi, the opportunities that will free up for the bottom six is going to work wonders. We know Matthews and Domi can play together. You know Nylander is a truly elite player and can carry that third line by himself. Try it, please. So yeah, like as Sam says, Matthews has proven he can play with meatballs. Run him with Holmberg and Domi. Well, maybe not Holmberg, but you could spread the wealth. That's the whole point, right? That's the luxury that having so many elite players is supposed to afford you, is you spread them out and now you have 3 good lines instead of 2, right? I still believe if Nyes continues to play reasonably well, he deserves a qualifying offer, while Nick Robertson, should he continue to play not greatly, doesn't. Well, David, don't worry. Nyes is going to get a qualifying offer regardless. Nyes is going to get an extension regardless. Like, Nyes is going to get a multi-year extension. He'll probably get a 3 to 4 year bridge deal, a cap hit that a lot of people will probably yell about, but then not really care about after a year. Like, if Nyes gets extended for 4 years at $5 million, let's say 5.5 million, but whatever, you might look at that originally and be like, I don't love that. And then a year later, you're going to look back and be like, well, the cap has gone up like 8 million, 9 million, whatever. It's fine. So it is what it is. Robertson, oof, man, that's a whole different can of worms with Robertson because he's got to get in the lineup, but then he gets in the lineup, he does nothing, and then he gets scratched. So, like, Robertson is really running out of opportunities. I don't like that there is, to quote Sheldon Keefe from that old Amazon documentary, now is the time, there's nothing to save it for. Nick Robertson, if you want to be on the Toronto Maple Leafs next year, this is the time. The next time you get in the lineup, you have to make sure that this is the last time you're scratched. Now, obviously, there has not been a lot in Robertson's game this year that has indicated he will play to a level that keeps him in the lineup consistently. But he's so capable. We know he has the potential. it just takes like 1 3-game stretch where he scores 3 goals. Like literally, he could go a 5-6 game stretch and score 4 goals, and we're all gonna sit back and be like, wow, where was this all season? So glad Robertson's finally living up to his expectations. That's all it's gonna take is one good stretch, and the narrative on Robertson completely flips. We haven't seen it yet. I hope we do. That would really help the bottom 6 problem that we've been having if Robertson can figure it out. And yeah, that's kind of the problem where we're at right now with everything. But anyways, back to Nyes. You see the potential with what he can be, which his potential is to be a 30-goal, 50, 60-point guy in the NHL, assuming he's playing with Matthews, because realistically, he's not someone who carries his own line, but he's a very good complementary piece. He is, it's the same vein as the Michael Buntings or the Zach Hymans of the world. And when I say Zach Hyman, I'm referring to Zach Hyman when he was with the Leafs and he was a 20 to 30 goal guy, not the 50 goal scorer that the Oilers had last year. Different players. They are different players in my mind because Hyman never hit that level in Toronto. So it is, yeah. Anyways, you make an interesting claim about Tavares, whether you remain captain. Stupid to just re-sign Marner and Tavares should. You know what? I'm going to turn us over to our third segment real quick because this is going to be an interesting conversation. David, thank you for handing me free content. As I turn over to the third segment, just a reminder to hit that like button and to subscribe to Game Over Toronto. Follow if you're on podcasting platforms. And just want to shout out Hyperdrive Hockey, the Game Over Network's flagship show. You can find it on the Game Over Network's main YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Hyperdrive Hockey. This third segment, now I have some things to talk about with regard to this specific matchup. This comment, though, I want to talk about this real quick. Tree Living will be incredibly stupid to just re-sign Marner and Tavares should the Leafs not make it to the 2025 Eastern Conference Final. Okay, so let's have a chat. Let's have a chat over what needs to happen this season. What the Leafs' minimum bar for success is. I want everyone in the chat right now, everyone watching, I want you to give me an answer over what you think the Leafs need to achieve to maintain the status quo that we've been maintaining for the last 8 years. Let's have a group therapy session. Now, I'm assuming David's is the Eastern Conference Final, based on what he just said. What would it take? What level of success would it take for you to be comfortable with the Leafs re-signing both Mitch Marner and John Tavares? Let's say, like Marner, he's going to get 12.5 probably. Let's say 12.5, maybe 13 at most. If he gets more than 13, I'm going to be outraged. Tavares, let's say he comes in at $5.5 to $6 million on a 3-year extension. All right, everyone in the chat, what would it take? What level of success do you need for those contracts for you to sign them? For you to sign those contracts? For me, personally, you need to at least win one series, and it needs to be a little bit more convincing than the win over Tampa in 2023. Because let's be honest with ourselves, for as fun as the 2023 like that series with Tampa was, where the Leafs finally win a series for the first time since 2004, there was an element of circumstance and luck to it, right? The Leafs win 3 games in overtime, I believe. Yeah, 3 games in overtime. They have a 4-1 comeback in the third period. They have just some really weird, so many goals from the point in that series to where, in the moment, you don't care. You win, you move on, let's go. In the aftermath, you lose to Florida. You get spanked by Florida. And in the aftermath, looking back on that series, you kind of look back and like, the Leafs kind of lucked their way into it a little bit. Now, obviously, it's not all luck, and I don't want to discredit that series win, but it is worth noting that the Lightning came out of that series and said, we played better in this series than they did in the 2022 series that they won in 7 games. So my bar is you win a series and you have to look good at it. I'm talking Matthews scores at least 4 goals in a 7-game series. Marner is over a point a game. Nylander's flirting with a point a game. You get depth scoring. The goaltending looks good. You win a good competitive series where you clearly look like the better team. And then in the second round, you can't get spanked either. You have to go toe-to-toe, even possibly win that series, right? This season is conference final or bust. If this season is a bust, the core 5 will need to be broken up. Yeah, Riley, you're stuck with because you signed him to a 7-year deal. Riley, you're stuck with. Matthews, you're happily stuck with. Nylander, you're happily stuck with. It's Marner and Tavares. Now you can, and look, let's be real. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's Marner. If you want to break up the core 4, it's Marner. Marner is the one that goes in this equation, right? You've already extended Nylander. You've extended Matthews. Tavares is going to be, it doesn't want to go anywhere else. You're going to get him back on a discount. Morgan Riley, you're stuck with. The only one that can leave is Marner. And the only way you're getting rid of Marner, because you're not going to trade him in the middle of the season, the only way you get rid of Marner is you let him walk to free agency. Now, is there a pathway to the Leafs doing that and getting better? Yeah. I mean, eventually. Look at what happened to the Islanders after Tavares left. They got better, actually. They made the playoffs. I think they won a round that year. And they quickly they went to back-to-back conference finals and lost to Tampa Bay back-to-back times, right? So there is a pathway to losing a superstar player and getting better. However, I do not believe the Leafs are capable of doing that. Just based on the fact of how they're okay, you lose Marner to free agency, and who replaces that, right? Because the theory is you free up $12 million of cap space, and you then spend it in free agency or whatever, and you pick up 2 middle 6 wingers to give you a more balanced lineup. Okay, well, first of all, Joseph Woll's extension kicks in. So that's he's signed for about $700K right now. He's going to jump up to, what was it, 4 million or something? Or 3 million, whatever. That's going to be a couple million. You have the Nyes extension. That's going to be a couple million. Tavares is still going to cost money. So yes, you're going to gain that cap space, but it's not going to be as much as you think. So, the Marner problem, the Marner conundrum, if you will, comes down to the Leafs' window for winning right now, the championship window. Let's be honest, for as much as the Leafs have stunk it up in the playoffs, this has been their window. And the core guys, Matthews, Nylander, Marner, they're in their prime right now, but they're not going to get better at this point. They're in their late 20s. So you're about 1 to 2 years away from looking back and saying, wow, they're all 30. Maybe 2 to 3 years away. 2 to 3 years away, I should say. So all of a sudden, you're looking at, okay, we get rid of Marner. Next season, it's very hard for us to get better. Then you basically are punting until 2026, 2027, when you can truly weaponize that cap space more. And all of a sudden, Matthews and Nylander are going to be 30 or 29, whatever. 29, 30. They're different ages, so I shouldn't clump them together. But you know what I mean? That's your problem. And your defense core, Morgan Riley's locked up into his mid-30s. Chris Tanev is not getting any younger. Jake McCabe is on the wrong side of 30. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is on the wrong side of 30. And then your D-core is locked up and they're aging. The Leafs have basically 2 to 3 years here to figure it out. And if you don't figure it out in the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to look back on this as the the era of the most wasted potential in Leafs history. Because this is your window. Like, I respectfully to the Washington Capitals, who got over the hump when Ovechkin was, how old was Ovechkin when he won a cup? 33, 34? Something like that, maybe 32. I don't know. Like, it's incredibly hard to get to that point because the Leafs don't have the young guys coming in to maybe Easton Cowan is a revelation. Maybe Fraser Minton grows into like a second line center. I don't think he will, but maybe. Like, you know what I mean? The pathway to winning a cup once the core guys are past their prime becomes so much more difficult. So if you're moving on from Marner, you basically have to concede we wasted these guys' primes, and now we have to try to find a second wind to give us a chance as they enter their 30s. That's where you're at. So, look, okay, David's been typing in chat, so I got to catch up here. Even letting one member of the core five go is better than none. The Canucks got better last season after trading Bo Horvat in exchange, blah, blah, blah. The Canucks GM was smart to not just stop at trading Horvat. Yeah. Okay, here's the problem with that. Here's the problem. Is Mitch Marner is a much better player than Bo Horvat. You are not, in a vacuum, again, yes, I see where you're coming from, right? You trade off an asset that is making too much money and just doesn't make sense for your team anymore. You get younger, you get better, you reload. The problem is Mitch Marner is in his prime, and the possibility is there that he leaves. And if he leaves, that is a 100-point player. That is your best penalty killer. He is your top power play quarterback because they run 5 forwards now, whatever. He drives your top power play. He drives your penalty kill. He scores 100 points. He will, barring injury, he's scoring over 100 points this year. That is so much harder to replace than Bo Horvat. So, and look, let's be fair. Let's look at the other side. Okay, if Marner leaves, you assume Nylander will take over the primary power play duties and the role that Marner takes. And you assume that you can figure it out with Matthews and Nylander. You can always invest in penalty killers. And you can invest in guys that potentially can add up to 100 points and they're balanced throughout the lineup. That's possible. The problem with that is the Leafs have not had a phenomenal track record in free agency as of late. Like, yes, you signed 2 good defensemen, but you also have fallen in love with Max Domi, who has given you nothing. Nothing. And look, yes, I understand that this is a huge playoff debate. The regular season doesn't matter. It does, but it doesn't at the same time. Like, you have to get to the playoffs, but look, if you lose Marner, replacing him is a much bigger challenge than the other teams that get rid of bloated contracts face. So, look, the thing that gets me is that the Leafs look good while Matthews is away. Even when they've been winning since he got back, they've looked pretty rough. That is a whole separate conversation. That again, and you know what? Maybe I'll talk about that in the 4th segment. I might flag that. It's going to come down to playoffs, right? And so much rides on these playoffs. Well, this is the thing, is I so badly in my core want to say that these playoffs matter so much. The future of the Leafs is on the line. But what has the Leafs organization done in the last 8 years to suggest that if they lose in the first round, there's going to be a major change? Dude, I'm sorry. I've given up hoping that there's going to be a major change. If they lose, let's say they walk into the playoffs, they play Boston or Tampa in the first round, and they lose in 7 games. We are all going to yell and scream that something needs to change. Brendan Shanahan is going to come out and say everything is on the table. We are going to absolutely consider major changes. And then they're just going to re-sign Marner and Tavares and, sign a depth guy in free agency and nothing's going to change. Like, I'm sorry, that is the one area where I will probably continue to be negative throughout most of the season, is I have such little faith in Brendan Shanahan and by extension Brad Treliving, because it's Shanahan's team. And nothing has really suggested that ownership is going to fire Shanahan. So that's where I'm at. Is, like, I apologize. That's the one area I'll be negative about. I want to be hopeful because, again, the potential is there. The potential is there for the Leafs to be so good. And there's always one thing. As I said earlier, there's always one thing. With that being said, this organization seems to want to promote individual players, not win cups. The lack of change is crazy. Yes. And with that being said, I'm going to turn us over to our fourth segment. This is where questions. This is where traditionally in these streams, this is the question segment. We've kind of abandoned that because, you guys have been such a delight with interacting with me tonight that we've basically made this whole show a question segment. But, I do have to mention this is the question segment. So if you have any Leafs questions, this is the time, or any comments in general. So I'm going to circle back to start this segment. I'm going to circle back to Luke's comment about how the Leafs have looked since Matthews has been in the lineup versus when he was out with injury. Now, we know for a fact that Mitch Marner and Max Domi, at the very least, are very, very guilty of looking for Matthews more than they should. When Matthews scores 69 goals, we don't care. But we know that Max Domi and Mitch Marner prioritize trying to get Matthews goals, which he doesn't need help. He can score on his own, guys. Like, I love Austin Matthews. I would love if he scored 70 next year. I'm not counting on it. He's scored 60 goals twice, which is something that hasn't been done since the turn of the century, right? Ovechkin never even did that. We do not need more. He will score on his own. We are okay. I wonder, there is an air of that. And we saw it down the stretch last year where everything at the end of the regular season was about getting Matthews to 70. Obviously, he doesn't get it done, but we know that every Leafs player was trying to get Matthews the puck, trying to get him a goal, trying to get him to 70. So there is that effect. The Matthews effect, if you will, is that everyone on his team seems to be trying their hardest to get him goals. And look, while scoring is obviously a great thing, there has been an over-prioritization of Matthews goals in particular. Again, as an Austin Matthews fan, I love it. Not in the playoffs, but I love it. So there is an element of that. But when Matthews is out of the lineup, and this is what I really think is the core problem. When Matthews is out of the lineup, the Leafs have to look inwards and say, oh no, our best player's out of the lineup. We all have to step up and we have to simplify our game. When the Leafs play a more simple game, who knew? They're actually really good at it because they're really talented. So when the Leafs are playing simple hockey built based off work ethic, they win because it's the old hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Except when the talent works hard, they're going to win. And when Matthews is out of the lineup, you tend to notice the Leafs simplify their games. They focus more on getting more shots on the net. They don't look for the perfect chance, they just shoot it. When Matthews is in the lineup, there's like this weird aura around the whole team where, especially Matthews and Marner, where it has to be the perfect shot. Has to be the perfect shot. Now, Matthews and Marner, because they're elite players, are capable of getting that perfect shot, which is how Matthews and Marner put up so many points. But I think the power play specifically is where you feel that effect the most. When Matthews is on the ice, look, tonight, that power play that Matthews scored on, if they did not score on that power play, we would have lost our minds because it's just Mitch Marner doing circles in the zone looking for Austin Matthews. That's the whole power play. That was what he tried passing into Nylander, didn't really have a shot. Riley, Tavares, I don't think touched the puck. It's literally just Marner circling, doing donuts around the zone, just waiting for Matthews to be open. He finds him, bang, goal. So, when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it sucks. And that is a major factor. Do we just book tomorrow as a scheduled loss in Buffalo? Less than 24 hours rest, not good circumstances. Hey, to the Leafs' credit, whenever they're supposed to lose a game or whenever things look at their most dire, that's usually when they win. There was earlier in the season, the Leafs were on a losing streak and the Winnipeg Jets were undefeated. And the Leafs looked bad going into that game. And I looked at the game and I said, I've never been more confident in a Leafs win. Because this isn't even a Leafs thing. This is just a hockey thing. Whenever a team or a player, whatever, whenever everything looks like it makes sense, the opposite will happen. Whenever a good team is on like a 10-game winning streak, they're going against a bad team on a 5-game losing streak. Yeah, the bad team's going to win. That is who I'd put my money on, because hockey's weird like that. It's so weird to where logic seems to go out the window a lot. Austin Matthews has appeared in so many commercials that he's looked better in them than he does on the ice. I mean, that the RBC ads, they're funny. The gotta make it count ones. Like, I remember last year he was just in them and Matthews looked so bad in them because he's not a great actor. And then this year he's a little bit more comfortable. There's one where he's holding a dog or something. I don't know. But did you guys see the I think it was Sportsnet who did the guess the players, and you have to the players were saying oh, I'm from I have this many points or whatever. And then they do the reveal where it's it's me, and it's and Matthews just does hey, it's Austin, and it's so cringy. It's so cringy, man. But yeah, I don't know. I obviously love Austin Matthews a lot, as many Leaf fans do. The problem is I don't. Well, it's a weird, very niche problem where the Leafs just overthink when he's in the lineup, but they play simple, effective hockey when he's not in the lineup. It's very weird. It's a very weird case study. I don't know. If this era of Leafs hockey doesn't lead to a championship, we're going to have to do a case study on that. Since the Raptors drafted Grady Dick, they haven't seen play-in or playoff action, but he's put up double-digit points in the regular season so often, even versus some of the best teams in the NBA. The Leafs could sure use more Gradys and not so many Nick Robertsons. I mean, this is the eternal conundrum, right? The problem is, how many times have the Leafs had a top 15 pick in the last however many years, right? And you know what? This isn't anyone's fault, but man, it really, what Rodion Amirov, rest in peace, because look, that brain tumor, Rodion Amirov would have been in the NHL by now. That's another one, right? Where you have a top 15 pick, the only one you really have in the last however many years. And it's no one's fault. The guy just unfortunately gets a brain tumor and passes away, unfortunately. So again, rest in peace to Rodion Amirov. It's just unfortunate, man. So your problem, David, is that the Leafs just haven't had the picks at the top of the first round to get the Grady Dicks of the NHL. I don't know who you would equate right now to Grady Dick. Maybe, I mean, you probably could make an argument that Matthew Nyes is your equivalent. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, if there's any last questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll get to them in just a second. But if there's not, thank you so much for joining me on Game Over Toronto. Again, a reminder to hit that like button and subscribe to the Game Over Toronto YouTube channel. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, make sure you hit that follow button and give the show a rating. You can find me on Twitter at Zach Payne 41 and follow the Game Over Network on Twitter as well. So I assume that's it. So thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Love to see all the action in the chat. David, Luke, Sam, Trevor, I believe, all of you. Thank you so much. You guys can catch Dominic and Lauren tomorrow night after the Leafs and Sabres game. And yeah, go Leafs, go. Thank you, everyone.